This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The top 5 questions Michigan football must answer now that fall camp is underway, next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
They said you can't beat Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Turns it. Get it. Touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. And fall camp is now underway for the Wolverines. They're about a week in. Soon the hitting will begin, the scrimmaging as well. Big Ten Network arrives on campus August the 14th for its special looking at the Michigan football team. So now's a great time to decide for ourselves what are some of the key questions that Michigan has to answer. And I want to give a disclaimer before I show you the 5 questions that I'm looking for answers for, because you have to put this in perspective of what your expectations are for the team this fall. And my expectation is championship Monday or bust. That doesn't mean if they don't get there, they win the Big Ten again and don't get there. That's still a tremendous season and I'll celebrate it. But that is the ultimate expectation. I mean, all these guys came back. Trevor Keegan, Zach Zinter, Blake Corum, et cetera. They all came back for Monday to get to Monday night, to get there. And that's the one thing this team has not done. I mean, they haven't even won a postseason game since Harbaugh's first year at all. And but you know, if you're a Michigan fan, losing postseason games is we win almost all the other games. We just don't win many of the postseason ones. But this is the team. It's loaded. Harbaugh is openly talking about challenging Georgia's record of 15 picks in the NFL draft. And I'm telling you right now, if I was setting an over/under on draft picks in Vegas for Michigan next year, it'd be like 14 or 15. So I don't think that's crazy talk at all. A lot of these guys have been in the program 4, 5, 6 years. So they may not have been the 5 stars that Ohio State got, but they're actually grown-ass men now. This is the team. And you have really the first-round draft pick at quarterback that Michigan has had in many a moon. And we haven't even had one officially be a first-round pick. Drew Henson should have been. But the last time we had one at quarterback was the coach himself back in 1987. So this is the team to get there. And so what I'm looking at are the details, because we could just roll the football and helmets out with the talent we have, put, game manager quarterback in there and just hand the ball off to Blake 20, Donovan 20, and, play action pass to wide open tight ends 10 to 15 times a game. Basically a less talented version of Cade McNamara. We could do that and probably, and at least go 9-3 with the baseline talent we have. That'd be like our low expectation. What I'm talking about are how do we take that next step now as a program? We have been the show team in the winner's circle the last 2 years in a row. How do we become the place or win team? Here are the 5 ways, I think. Number 1, J.J. McCarthy has to truly be ready and given, if he is, the helm. He is, to me, he is the ceiling driver of the team. We have seen the last 2 years that Michigan can win the Big Ten with a game manager. That was Cade McNamara in 21. And then a game manager plus. That was J.J. last year. It is time for J.J. to now be the true straw that stirs the drink, especially in the RPO game. Hand him the reins. And I think that's ultimately what winning national championships in college football is all about. Number 2, can we construct a passing scheme that gets guys open sooner and quicker? Last season, I watched both Nebraska in person from the press box and then Fiesta Bowl from the All-22 camera angle. So I saw both of them from the All-22 eye in the sky. I was stunned at how little separation there was with our wide receivers and also at how long our routes took to develop. That again, that's the difference between are you 10-2 and you lost close to Penn State and Ohio State and you're playing in the Peach Bowl and guys are opting out for a New Year's Six Bowl, in other words, 2016, 2018, or are you playing on that Monday night? That's the difference. Some of you are going to say, well, wait a minute, against Ohio State, JJ had his best game, then came back against Purdue. What are you talking about? Look at the way Ohio State played. Ganging up on Michigan, playing a lot of cover zero. Now, those aren't hard throws that JJ made in that game. From a throwing standpoint, they are from a courage standpoint because he stood in there, man, against the teeth of those Buckeyes and delivered. But I mean, those were all pretty basic throws against man-to-man coverage or you got him coverage. The hard part was getting the throw off. What I'm talking about is last year, J.J. McCarthy was the highest rated quarterback in the country in play action, but dropped precipitously in straight dropbacks. You got to correct that. Because again, that's the difference between we're like, oh man, we blew another opportunity to take that next step again, or we took that next step. Can you, if you're going to play in the NFL, you want to be a first round draft pick, then put more into the quarterback's hands, quicker routes, easier routes, get the ball in space to your playmakers quicker. All right, number 3 on that list. Do we have a backup quarterback that could come off the bench and make a throw like, what Brian Griese did to beat Ohio State way back in the day if needed? Now, the room is deep. A lot of names we know, but outside of JJ, not a lot of people we know well as producers. Furthermore, is the 24 quarterback even in that room? Because you're going to play some scrubs first month of the year. Great opportunity to find out if the 24 quarterback is in that room. But the way JJ likes to throw his body around and everything else, I mean, he's bigger and thicker than he was last year. But let me give you a scenario. You're up by 3, you're up by 7 on the road at Penn State, undefeated. You're trying to run out the clock, close that game out. Do you have somebody who can come off the bench and execute in that situation if JJ's in concussion protocol? Can you do that? He can make that 3rd and 4 waggle throw to Colston Loveland or A.J. Barner to convert the first down and move the chains. Just be poised enough. Come in, help make the line calls, direct to the offense. We're just going to grind this thing out, hand it off to Donovan and Blake and go on home. Is that guy in that room? I think you need to find that out here in this training camp. Number 4, we were kind of blindsided by the news that Will Johnson's knee surgery happened in the offseason. A lot of us didn't even know he had a knee issue. So how healthy is he? There's been talk he'll be ready, talk maybe they'll rest him the first couple weeks given the caliber of opponents because that's an all-American level player right there. And you've already got some question marks at the other cornerback slot. So again, thankfully, we're opening up with a month of scrubs. So a lot of guys are going to get to play, but ultimately, when it gets to November, we need Will friggin' Johnson, all right? However long that takes. And then number 5, and this is, I don't think, being talked about enough. Who's replacing Money Moody? Now, the answer is nobody. You're not going to instantly replace the greatest kicker in program history, one of the highest drafted kickers in the history of the NFL draft. You're not going to instantly replace that guy. But remember, Jimmy plays complementary football, and a solid kicking game for him is a must. I mean, his field goal kickers, whether it was at Stanford, whether it was with the 49ers, whether it's here, get a lot of opportunities. That's a high-use position in a Jim Harbaugh program. And so whether it's the Louisville transfer, whether it's the top recruit from 2 years ago who was kicking the low knuckle balls in the spring game, whether it's the top-rated kicking recruit they're bringing in this month, one of those guys has to be adequate plus. What do I mean by that? Reliable from 42 yards in, 45 yards in, and then you hope if you need to make a 55-yarder to beat Ohio State at the end of the year, there's a chance. If you do that, then I think that's a very successful season, replacing Jake Moody, who's an all-timer here. So those are the key questions I'm looking at. First of all, let us know which ones you are in the comment section here on either iTunes or YouTube. We'll find out what our Buckeye friend Mark Rogers thinks about those and other issues around Michigan fall camp in a moment. It has been too long. Time again for the 10-minute war and our good friend Mark Rogers, who himself has a fantastic channel here on YouTube, the voice of college football. I've actually, if you're wondering who are the 30 people, Mark, that have been watching your channel play out Michigan season on the old NCAA football game, I am ashamed. I am one of them, which shows even with all the various jobs, man, I still have too much free time. Brother, how are you?
I don't know how you have any free time. And also those simulations, I must confess, I want nothing to do with them. I don't watch them. I don't care about them. They're posted by somebody else. I also have to admit, now that I see a side-by-side with me wearing the more Michigan of the blue, this really needs to be just an off-season wardrobe selection by me. In 3 weeks, I need to get rid of this shirt for a good 4 months.
I find myself getting upset. Like when a screen is called on 3rd and 12, I get mad. I have to stop myself and say it's a video game simulation. Like I watched the simulation of the Minnesota game last night, and we get down to the 6-yard line. I'm even using pronouns for the video game. We get down to the 6-yard line right before the half, and we had a timeout left, and the computer decides to do a hurry up rather than call a timeout, and the clock runs out on us. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. But then I stopped and remembered, wait a minute. For as great as Jim Harbaugh has been the last 2 years, clock management before the end of a half has never been his thing. So maybe this is a realistic simulation, right? All right. So
I know that we have people, Steve, that respond to those simulations.
Yes.
And it has changed their minds about the actual teams.
Oh
like it has completely convinced them to go another direction.
Oh my gosh, that's taking it too far. I'm just willing to sit in my basement alone at midnight and watch it. At 50 years old, I'm not taking it seriously. I'm just that pathetic. All right, let's get to it. Fall camp is underway. Mark, I laid out some of my big storylines. You can comment on which of those struck your eye or what you are looking forward to, and answers you're looking to get out of Michigan here, with the Wolverines likely to receive their highest preseason rating when the AP poll comes out next week. The last time they were in the top 3 in the preseason, 1993, right?
Oh, 93. Okay.
Now that team finished 8.
I do remember them tripping up against Wisconsin in 1981 as preseason number one. I do recall that one.
Yep. Yeah, but in 1993, they were preseason number 3, brought a lot of people back from that Rose Bowl team that went undefeated with the 3 ties. Remember that kind of weird year? And they Notre Dame came in kind of it was supposed to be like a rebuilding year for them after losing Jerome Bettis and everybody, and Lou Holtz got an advanced copy of Rudy and showed that to the team the night before, and they went out and upset Michigan at the Big House, and that ended up being a disappointing Michigan season at 8-4. Now it did end with a 28-0 rout of your Buckeyes, so there was that, I guess. But that's the last time Michigan was ranked in the top 3 of the preseason AP poll. So a lot happening here for the Wolverines. What are you looking at?
Well, in reviewing what you had to say, Steve, and then also picking up some narratives that I've been thinking about for a long, long time, I have heard that J.J. McCarthy has taken to his health and fitness and training like a championship quarterback should. So I think both of us can relate to and have those thoughts about NFL quarterbacks and the ones that take the job insanely serious, the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady's, versus the guys that are just that talented. And sure, they studied the playbooks. Sure, they're professionals, but they're not really that guy. And J.J. McCarthy more and more is showing to be in his approach to the game, in his leadership approach even, to be that guy. So good news for the Wolverines that J.J. McCarthy is not just a dynamic playmaking quarterback, but it appears as though, and I'm never saying that it was doubted at any point, but continuing to mature as a leader and as a guy that takes on that responsibility of being first one in the door, last one to leave, that sort of mentality of leadership and example. So that with J.J. McCarthy. Now, the backup quarterback situation, I will say that much like you, there's doubts about whether somebody can bridge, 2 or 3 games and be able to not necessarily go out there and throw for 350 yards against Penn State on the road, but, beat some decent mid-level Big Ten teams, if there is such a thing, on Michigan's schedule, and bridge the gap. Now, I would say on one hand, while I'm not confident of that based on the actual quarterbacks, I'm confident in the system. I'm confident in the running game. I'm confident in the offensive line. And I also think that even the elite programs in college football, most of them are in this same situation. Rarely do we see in this day and age backup quarterbacks with much experience at all. So it's just Michigan's in the same place in terms of backup quarterback play than just about everybody else that's competing for a conference or national championship. We'll continue to be fascinated as we get into the season about the use of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in 2 ways, in regards to volume and then also in regards to the style of plays and the workload given to both. Of course, Donovan Edwards more of a pass receiver out of the backfield, and something that, a lot of people need to consider. And those Ohio State fans that were considering some injury losses down the stretch for them entering the game last year need to consider, for as good as that Donovan Edwards was that we ran into in Columbus, he was compromised. He wasn't even the player that he could be.
Right.
And there are actually people out there that actually think he may turn out to be the best back in the Big Ten.
If you were picking us apart from an Ohio State perspective, what angle are you looking at with Michigan right now?
Well, I'm looking at space. I'm looking at on the defensive side. You mentioned the Will Johnson surgery during the offseason. Hopefully he's okay. We want people to be healthy. And I just thought that he proved himself to be that guy down the stretch last season and would only get better and show himself to be a college superstar. Now, the second cornerback position obviously is in question. And when you lose DJ Turner, Jamon Green, much made out of Amarian Walker in regards to his freakish athleticism, but we saw him kind of ripped apart in the spring game by a walk-on. I'm not going to put too much stock in that, but still, they need multiple corners in that final game. And so that's one place to possibly take advantage. And then on the flip side, again, until proven otherwise, I don't see the guy to throw to when it's 3rd and 12 and you just say, hey, our dude's better than your dude. We're going to throw it that way regardless. Ohio State, I think, has one of those guys. And maybe they got 2 or 3, or maybe they've got some incoming freshmen that are actually going to be those guys as well. What they're doing at wide receiver recruiting is obviously just unworldly, but that seems to be the Michigan. I think they've got a good collection of players, but I hear good things about Tyler Morris possibly being a breakout guy that could eventually be that kind of receiver.
The stuff we're talking about here, and I mentioned it at the top, we're really talking about the difference between, the level of personnel Michigan's going to put on the field, and the fact that Harbaugh has shown he can win with a non-quarterback reliant system. Now, he won a Big Ten with that way in 2021. He won a lot of games at Michigan that way prior to 2021. But it's hard to win championships without having a quarterback that you can rely on. But the base level of talent Michigan has and the way that Harbaugh has proven he can win, this team could play you at quarterback and just hand the ball off to Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum 20 times apiece and throw flare passes to those guys and probably go 9-3. All right, so we're talking really about what are the details that get you from back-to-back playoff appearances to playing that final Monday night and maybe having a legitimate chance at winning. And the stuff that you and I are talking about right now and the stuff that's in my, J.J. McCarthy gets deaned against Penn State. You're up by 7. You got to hold on to the lead. Can a guy come in and manage that game and close it out? That kind of stuff. Because that's the difference between being 10-2 in the Peach Bowl and a game where you got guys opting out, right, in a New Year's Six game, or you're playing in the college football playoff for a third year in a row. The kinds of details, frankly, your program has wrestled with every single year to maintain this level. These are the kinds of details that now Michigan has to wrestle with to maintain the level that they've achieved and to try to take it to that one last step.
I will take it to this degree that outside of Clemson, when they were Clemson for a decade, up until a couple of years ago, Georgia recently and currently, and Alabama seemingly forever, I have less questions about this Michigan team than any other team. And notice I left Ohio State out of it. That doesn't mean that I haven't seen better Ohio State teams, but we always would come into the season with some questions. Mm-hmm. Now, the questions that I'm bringing up seem to be nitpicky, but to your previous point, they are the questions that need to be answered favorably when the chips are down during those couple key points of the season that may or may not come up. Maybe they've got a 22-point lead against Ohio State in the fourth quarter, but may or may not come up where they need those weaknesses to at least be solid, non-factors of sorts, neutral. The wide receiver position, the corners, of course, that's a bad matchup against Ohio State if they don't get that worked out and find enough guys that are capable. You can only scheme around that space so much. You can't do much out on an island. You can, of course, mix up coverages and do some things to cover that up. But I don't have questions about this Michigan team other than, are the wide receivers going to make plays? And is the secondary, especially at the cornerback position, deep enough and elite enough to win and win at that level? Psychologically, what I think is in Michigan's favor is that they've slayed the giant and they've accomplished what they've accomplished in the conference. So they've got the proof of concept and that confidence that they can beat just about anyone, but they're still hungry because they haven't accomplished it yet. I think that helps them in recruiting. And I also believe that still trying to reach the mountaintop should help this team.
Let's switch gears and talk about your team in fall camp. And I watched Big Ten Media Days. Props to you. You got a lot of airtime, brother. I don't know if anybody told you that or not. You did. And I even saw you ask a question of your coach, Ryan Day, and he seemed to agree with the premise of your question. So what are you hearing a weekend at Ohio State camp? And what are you concerned about? Because it is an interesting season for the Buckeyes, where I'm seeing mock drafts with 7, 8, 9 Ohio State players in the top 100 picks of the draft. And yet, it seems like in terms of how those guys are going to play and who's going to play, they actually have more questions than Michigan and Penn State both do heading into this season at the same time. So it's kind of a fascinating mix where the ceiling of talent is certainly exceeded the existential questions we think we have answers to.
Until I see differently, I believe that this team is more equipped to win a national championship than Michigan, but Michigan is better equipped to win the Big Ten and is more of a sure thing. And if Ohio State loses 3 games this year, I'm not going to be shocked. I'd have to go back to 2016 before I'd find this many question marks on an Ohio State football team. But again, I'll consider them question marks. They're not weaknesses, not yet. New quarterback hasn't played a meaningful game. That's apparent to all of us, and we will all be arguing and stating our point in regards to, do we trust Ryan Day, the system, the offense, the playmakers, and a string of quarterbacks, Steve. Listen to this. Even beyond the guys that are obvious, Ohio State has not had a quarterback since the year 2000 who did not play for a championship. And basically win a championship if you consider getting to the playoff, C.J. Stroud. The rest of them won at least Big Ten championships. All of them. Todd Beckman. All of them.
Picking on your boy Steve Bellisari again. Go ahead. Poor Steve picking on your boy Steve Bellisari again. Poor Steve Bellisari.
The last one. Yes.
But keep going. Yeah.
Well, if it wasn't for Drew Brees throwing a 60-yard bomb in West Lafayette, maybe he could have added that to his accomplishments. But the offensive line. So we go from a situation, and this is cyclical, especially for offensive lines, as I review offensive line play and the total number of starts, the incoming transfers and all that, which the transfer portal has mitigated this to a certain extent, but it seems as though the last year's inexperienced offensive lines become this year's experienced offensive lines and vice versa. For Ohio State, it's more internal and it's more segmented, where last year the strength was they had 2 NFL tackles, tremendous players, could protect the quarterback, had issues running the ball against the likes of Northwestern between the tackles. This year it should be inversed, where the tackles, wow, they're trying to figure things out. Of course, highly recruited players, but it's the guard, center, guard play that's supposed to be stout and strong for Ohio State. And I talked about Michigan's use of Corum and Edwards. How about Ohio State's use of potentially 5 backs? What do you do with these guys? I think it's the deepest room in the country, but unfortunately, you don't need 5 running backs. You need 2 to 3, and they're going to have an interesting. And that's actually what I asked Ryan Day in a side session. How are you going to utilize these running backs? Is it going to be simply he's the best, he's the second best, he's the third best, or more nuanced in regards to this is what he does well, this is what he does well, without making it obvious to the opponents how you're utilizing these guys? And again, he gave me the same type of response he did to the Jim Knowles defense, that we got to figure this out in the next few weeks. And then, yes, to Jim Knowles defense, do you expect this group of players to just know it better and execute it better 1 year later? Or is Jim Knowles flexible enough and adaptable enough to understand that it may need to be tweaked in some ways? And the secondary play at Ohio State, especially at cornerback, has been so substandard the last 3 football seasons. Yeah, 21 and 22. Yes, those 3 seasons, I just don't recognize those guys from what was arguably the best secondary play in college football for the previous 10 years.
Well, remember I said last year, Jim Knowles is not a man-ball DC. Jim Knowles is out of the Don Brown playbook. And it's very interesting. You go back to last year's game between the two of us. That was almost an exact replay of the second half of Ohio State, Michigan 2019 at the Big House. And the first half in 2018. Don Brown, now you're playing man-to-man. And Urban and Day are just running crossing routes, and guys are wide open downfield. Running back blows a gap. One guy blows a gap. The running backs, Dobbins is gone for 50. We just switched jerseys. Exact same thing happened. You're out there playing man defense on 3rd and 9. Guys are just out there open, beating one cover 0. Blake Martinez blows one gap. There's no other level. Donovan Edwards is just off, doing calisthenics for the next 60 yards. The 2022 Ohio State-Michigan game was an exact replay of the 2018 and 2019 Michigan-Ohio State games. Just flip the script. Don Brown's coaching your defense now. And it'll be fascinating to see how he responds to that. I would imagine he will be less helter-skelter. And that's where we go back to your original point. Is last year, J.J. McCarthy was the top-rated quarterback in the country in play action, which makes sense given Michigan's running game. Now this year, I think you'll see teams gang up on the run less. We were mystified, or gang up on the run more, I should say. We were mystified on the Michigan side of things last year, watching so many teams not load the box against us. So many teams played both safeties back. I think there was maybe too much respect for JJ's arm compared to Cade at first. And we played against a lot of light boxes. Your team was really the first. Illinois did it too. You guys in Illinois are really the first teams that really loaded the box against us. And I think this year you'll see more teams do that early on, so that we don't run for 300-400 yards a game on him like we did last year. And I think you'll see JJ just light those teams up in on play action and man-to-man early in the year. I think you'll put up huge numbers. Last year we threw the ball 63% of the time. We still might run it 60% of the time, but the level of efficiency in that other 3%, I think is going to go way higher. The real test, I bet you guys will not gang up on us like you did last year. And you'll say to JJ, now show me you can straight drop back and execute down the field. Show me you can do that. And that's really the test of whether J.J. McCarthy is a first-round draft pick in the 2024 draft or the 2025 draft. If he shows that he can step back and drop back passing and execute at a high level, he'll be a first-round pick next April. If he doesn't, he'll be back at Michigan next year. Before we let you go, another round of Big Ten expansion, conference realignment. This stuff is nuts. You know how this is ending, Mark. This is ending with eventually, like, we're just going to be back into split divisions again. Okay? 2 different Big Tens. The original one, Miami and Notre Dame will join the new one, okay, with USC and Washington and Oregon. And the conference championship game is East and West again at the Rose Bowl, just like it was. It's just both Big Ten teams now. But your thoughts on, it seems as if everybody just finally decided, you know what? This kind of clear channel cumulus consolidation is where we're going anyway. So while all these Pac-12 schools are up for bid with no contract and no gain of rights, we're going to be doing this in 2033 anyway, so let's just get out of the way and do it right now. That kind of seems to me like what went on here. Your thoughts?
Well, some people want to blame Fox and ESPN, but they run businesses, so they're not caring of college football except for as it relates to their bank vaults. And then some people want to blame the conferences themselves, Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti now, Kevin Warren. Well, they are hired by the SEC and the Big Ten. Their only job is to make money and build the brand and the equity and value of those respective conferences. I think it all goes back to a governing body of college football. This is why the NFL works so well and professional sports leagues, is because the moves that are made, the decisions that are made are for the good of the entire sport and to advance the sport and make the most money for everyone. And that's why we just see a free-for-all and 2 conferences jumping to the top. And now it appears with the ACC reaching out to Stanford and Cal, that they're going about it the Big 12 way, that we will just stay alive just trying to bring in as much volume as possible and as much territory as possible. But the Big 12 is not winning any national championships with the likes of Arizona State and Arizona added to what they already have. But they're going to stay, depending on your definition, relevant because they will make money, play football, fill stadiums.
Yeah,
but will
Dr. Pepper's never outselling Coke and Pepsi either, Mark. But that doesn't mean there's not a place in the market for Dr. Pepper.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they will be a non-entity when it comes to winning national championships. I just don't see it. So the SEC and the Big Ten will continue. They may, I've said this from the beginning, that there are 2 ways in which they're making decisions, basically. Punch, counter punch to keep up with each other, or just to survey and evaluate the rest of the schools available and to make a determination, do they add value? And I think it's some combination of both. And with the Big Ten doing what it's doing right now, I think they're even at a place where they're not necessarily gaining television value after it's redistributed among 18, but they see where this is headed and they're out in front of it. And they want partners for USC and UCLA on the West Coast.
Whether it will be better remains to be seen. It will be different. I will say unquestionably the slate of games you're going to see week in and week out starting next year is going to blow people's minds.
Yes.
Whether that makes up for the traditions and regionalizations that were just a cherished part of the quirks of this sport for decades remains to be seen. If I had to guess, with the generation that grew up only in that era, it won't. With you and I's Gen X generation, we'll probably be not really happy about it, but it could be worse, and it is what it is. And a younger generation that was never fully immersed or imbued with those traditions will think it is great. That's my guess. I'll give you the last word.
Penn State, for example, going out to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA. I cannot think of a time when those 2 schools got together, not during my lifetime. Mm-hmm. That's exciting. I love the matchups. We don't see enough big-time matchups in college football. So I love it from a scheduling standpoint. And the geek in me loves to throw the 18 teams down and say, okay, how should this be aligned? What should the divisions be? How should we schedule it? All of that. But when that wears off, when the shine is tarnished from Ohio State playing USC every year, every 2 out of 3 years, and Michigan playing, the big schools all playing the games that we've not had a chance to see very often. when that shine wears off again, I think the unique quality of college football, it's basically a AAA version of the NFL now. And I don't think that's good for the sport. And I don't think that's going to be appealing to the masses, certainly not to our age bracket, but even the ones that don't know that they're missing out will be missing out on what college football once was. That fabric has been torn to shreds. People talking differently, different values, different music, different foods, different, the regionality, the culture of the sport completely abolished.
We shall see. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. All right, take care.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you which college football team would win in a hypothetical matchup. 81% of you believe the 2023 Michigan Wolverines, who have yet to play a game, would beat the 22 Michigan Wolverines, which is the first team in this illustrious program's history to ever go 13-0. Never happened before. That is something. I mean, that speaks to the expectations for this season. I also think last year's team maybe deserves a little bit more respect, okay? A little bit more. They did something that's never happened here since 1879. Recognize, all right? Nevertheless, man, the hype around here is crazy. As I was saying to Mark Rogers, next week, AP poll comes out for the preseason. I suspect Michigan will receive its highest preseason rating in the AP poll in 30 years. That brings us to our feedback of the week. Jay Wright says, hey, I've been impressed with Jake Butt on the Big Ten Network breaking down expansion. I've just been impressed with Jake Butt on Big Ten Network talking anything. That guy is a natural. Big time. And so is Devin Gardner. Way underutilized. Gardner is good. He's really good calling a game. I mean, he's got the youthful exuberance and he knows his stuff. Really good. Both of those guys make Michigan proud in front of the camera for sure and behind the microphone. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, recommend, follow, help us to find more Michigan fans just like you. Whether you're watching here on YouTube, listening on iTunes, or elsewhere, we would appreciate it. You can also follow us in between episodes on Twitter or X or Twitter X or whatever the X it is. At Michigan Podcast is where you can find us there. At Michigan Podcast there. And again, we will see you next time here on Michigan Podcast. Until then, I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.